All right, so this Saturday night, we got a big boxing match on our hands. It is Jake Paul versus Nate Diaz. Saturday night, August 5th, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This boxing match is going to be taking place at 185 pounds. It's going to be a 10-round fight. Now, Jake's usually used to fighting 8-round fights. And the current betting odds are minus 300 for Paul and plus 250 for Diaz. So, pretty close, I would say. And I'm pretty stoked for this fight. I think it's going to be a competitive one. We're probably going to see like some back and forth action between the two. I just wanted to give like my own personal breakdown and thoughts on this fight. I mean, I've been following like the YouTube boxing space. I've always been a boxing fan, but I've been following the YouTube boxing space until like since 2018, I guess. And was it 2018 in the summer or maybe a bit before that when KSI fought Joe Weller in that main event, and then he beat Joe Weller, and that's when he called out the Paul brothers. And I guess for like the next YouTube boxing match in 2018 is when he fought Logan Paul in the main event for the first time. And then they had the draw, and then they rematched, and then he beat him by like split decision or unanimous decision. It's pretty interesting. I know these fights aren't meant to be like really big pro fights, or I don't know, looked at on the same level as like pro fights, but all in all, it's an interesting thing. And yeah, I just want to break things down here. So let's start off with the Stockton native bad boy here, Nate Diaz. He's a UFC veteran, one hell of a fighter. He made his MMA debut in 2004 for the WEC. The WEC was like a promotion owned by the UFC at one point, I think. I remember Uriah Faber was the WEC champ for the longest time. And I think that's where Dominic Cruz got his start as well. It was a really good promotion and pretty competitive from what I remember, like back in the day. I used to watch it all the time. And yeah, Diaz's overall MMA record is he's never had a boxing match. So this is strictly MMA. 21 wins, 13 losses. He's had 5 KOs, so not that much. He's currently 38 years old, standing at 6 feet tall. And he usually fights at welterweight, which is 170 pounds. But it's been rumored that like he probably walks around at like 190, I guess, maybe max 195. I don't think he's a huge guy. I mean, I think Jake is a little bit bigger. And that should be interesting coming into the fight as well, right? So I just want to go over a bit of like strength and weaknesses for both fighters here. And we could start off with Diaz. And one strength that Diaz has is his endurance. Just like his brother Nick, like they're both known for doing triathlons, running, swimming, biking, crazy cardio. They're always active. They're known to go the distance, both fighters. And even when they go the distance, they're not even tired at the end. In most occasions anyways, as far as I remember. I've watched like pretty much all their fights. And their cardio was just crazy. And since this is a 10-round fight, I believe like the endurance aspect of this matchup is in favor to Diaz. Because I mean, 38, it isn't that old in my opinion. And Diaz has always been pretty active. And he looks in great shape. He's been constantly fighting and doing cardio. So I would think Diaz's cardio should be good for Saturday night, and it always has been good up until this point. So, that's one major strength right there. And another strength he has is durability. I mean, Nate has suffered 2 TKO losses in his career, and the first one was to Josh Thompson in 2013. He's from like a head kick followed by punches. I forget who the ref was. It might have been Herb Dean or somebody. But it was like a legit TKO where they had to wave it off. Like Nick wasn't completely out. He might have been like out for a second and then back up. But anyways, that was a legit stoppage. And then the second stop, which was against Jorge Masvidal in 2019, I think that was for the BMF belt, if I'm not mistaken. It might have been like the inaugural BMF fight. But yeah, against Jorge in 2019, that fight ended due to doctor stoppage due to a cut. And I'm sure Nate could have kept going like another couple rounds, even though Jorge was dominating that fight. It just shows like Nate is pretty durable. He's always willing to go forward. In that Jorge fight, he got knocked down like at least 2 or 3 times from what I remember, but he kept getting back up and pressing forward. So, Diaz, he's kind of got like that Rocket Balboa vibe where he like presses forward no matter what. He's got his hands up, his chin out, and he's like just like a dog in the fight, always willing to go for it. So that's a huge strength right there. And he's got experience. I mean, the guy's been fighting since 2004. So that's pretty much like 20 years. And he's fought like guys like Conor McGregor, Jorge Masvidal, Josh Thompson, like we said, Leon Edwards, I believe he fought. So he's fought a lot of tough guys. And he's been in there consistently. So I think, in terms of experience, he definitely has the edge there versus like Jake, who's only fought since 2020, I guess. And yeah, experience definitely goes to Diaz, I would say. Now, let's go on to weaknesses. He does have some weaknesses for sure. And one of those I would say is damage. Like, we know Nate is durable, but also he takes a lot of punches. This is like both the Diaz brothers, I would say. They're known to move forward, but also, they move forward with like their chin up and out, and they kind of want to like bait their opponents to throw more punches to potentially tire them out, or I guess get the opponents to throw so they could throw the counter and capitalize on that, right? But the thing is, when you do that, you're going to take a lot of damage. And we saw against Jorge, he got the cut and the doctor stopped it. And he was getting knocked down in that fight as well. So what I'm worried about in this fight on Saturday is if Diaz gets cut or if he gets knocked down too many times or takes too many blows without answering them, that the ref will just like wave it off and stop it, which would suck in my opinion. It'd be cool if it goes into those later rounds so we could see like how Jake's gas tank compares to Nate's, who's proven his gas tank in the past many times. So there is that. And that also correlates with his next weakness, which is defense. Like I said, Nate leaves his chin up there. He leaves it open. And he gets hit a lot. To take a few hits, at least to the head and body. And Jake does have some good power. So I believe, Nate, he's got to keep his guard up or keep active. Because you don't want to be taking too much hits and have the ref like wave it off or something. And yeah, this goes into the third weakness for Diaz here. A lot of the times he fights emotional. So, I mean, if he gets hit hard, then he might want to go harder or like, defend himself like tit for tat or something like that. And if you're more of a scientific fighter, maybe you could kind of dissect that and read your opponent and use that against their weakness, right? Because from what I've seen, I don't think Jake has gotten too emotional in his fights. Like, he's definitely got hit and he's been tagged, and I guess in that fight with Fury, he's done like a little bit of clinching, and there was some like dirty tactics going on where the ref had to warn them a bunch of times, if I remember correctly. But I haven't seen Jake get like too emotional otherwise. He seems like pretty straight-headed and going for the fight and playing to his strategy and so on. So Yeah, Diaz is known to get emotional, and I see that as a weakness ultimately. But hopefully he still goes in there and uses some emotion and brings an entertaining fight, but also uses enough strategy to, use his experience against Jake here. And about Jake, onto him. Um, he made his boxing debut in 2020, and it was against another YouTuber, Ali Gibb. And I briefly remember this fight. I remember like Gibb not being pretty much competitive at all. It was kind of a weird fight. Like Jake just kept knocking him down, and he eventually knocked him out, right? So there was that, and then there was the fight against Nate Robinson, the basketball players, and he also knocked him out. But then he fought some MMA fighters, so he fought tougher competition, and he overall has a record of 6-1 with 4 KOs. It's pretty respectable. He's 26 years old, standing at 6'1", rumored to walk around 200 pounds, so he should be a little bit bigger than Diaz there. So that should be interesting. You kind of like combine that with his power, his knockout power, and being the bigger guy, that could be a problem for Nate, right? So in terms of Paul's strength, like we'll go into it here, he's younger, so that could be a weakness in terms of inexperience, but also it could be an advantage due to him having like a learning kind of curve. Like Nate's kind of already learned so much, so maybe since Jake is younger, he can learn at a more rapid rate and kind of take on, this boxing thing a bit more than Nate in that regard. Possibly. It's hard to say. But he seems to have some solid trainers. I think he's training with Sugar Shane Mosley for this fight, who is a legend in himself. So there is that. So, and he seems to get like the foundations of boxing decently, like in terms of throwing like the jab and the cross and basic combos and things of that nature. And like I said, he's still quite young, so he has time to, get more serious if he wants to, basically. And like we mentioned before, he's got the KO power. So, he's knocked out Robinson, he's knocked out Gibb, he knocked out Ben Askren as well, who's not really a striker at all, but it was still like a very impressive knockout. Like he went down flat on his face. And then in that second Tyron fight as well, like he knocked him flat on his face too. And I know there's been like some controversy around that where people think it might be fixed. And it honestly does look a bit sketchy. But I don't know. Like it's hard to say. Let's just, leave it as if it is a legit knockout, then it is what it is. And it looked impressive. I mean, they had a split decision in their first fight. So it was pretty close, but I think Jake ultimately won the fight. And yeah, he knocked Tyron out clean in the second fight. And I think up until the knockout, he was pretty much like dominating Tyron. Another thing is he even knocked down Anderson Silva in not his last fight, but in the fight before Fury when he fought Silva in the 8th round. Like he knocked Anderson Silva down pretty clean. And I would say Silva is known for having a good chin. Yeah, he did get knocked out by Chris Weidman that one time. And I think he's been dazed by other fighters since then. But still, I would say, yeah, Silva was older. He is older and such. But we've seen consistent like knockout power from Jake. And it wouldn't surprise me if Jake lands something on Nate and knocks him down. Like on numerous occasions, I would say. It wouldn't surprise me. And he also has endurance. Another thing Jake has, like, you don't really see him get tired, I would say. There has been points in the fights where he has been a bit sloppy, I guess, in terms of like maybe his footwork and things of that nature. But in terms of his endurance, it seems like he's been going pretty good in his fights, and he's had quite a few decisions now against Fury. He had the split decision against Anderson. He had the unanimous decision against Tyron. He had the split decision. So, those were all 8-round fights, if I'm not mistaken. So he's proved that he could go the distance, and if he's keeping his cardio up the way he is, then we shouldn't have a big doubt of him to stick in there for the whole fight. Now, it is an extra 2 rounds, so that is going to be interesting. Those extra 6 minutes, I guess. Especially if Diaz puts on the pace like he has with other opponents, then that'll be really interesting to see if Paul could keep up with that pace. But I would say he does have a good endurance stat, so there is that. And moving on to his weaknesses, I have down here that he's inexperienced. He's still young. He's 26 years old, and he's really only fought maybe there's Fury, Silva, and Tyron. I guess you could say Askren too, even though Askren's not really a boxer or a striker. But you could say 3 to 4 notable opponents he's fought. And that's not a lot. But also, in those fights, he's performed pretty good, I would say. Even in the Fury loss, he performed pretty damn good. So, there is that. And Nate's not like a pure boxer. Yeah, he's trained with Andre Ward, and he is a good striker in MMA, but we still don't know how that's going to cross over to boxing. It's kind of unknown in my opinion. So, yeah, Jake is inexperienced. But also he's getting more experience, so there is that as well. And there's the technical ability, which could also be a weakness. Like, he does seem to have the basic fundamentals of boxing down, but also there is the fact that sometimes his footwork looks sloppy. His hands, he might tend to leave them down. I think it was in the Woodley fight where his footwork was looking really strange at certain points, and people were looking at Woodley to take advantage of that. And in the Anderson fight, I think at the start of it, he was leaving his hands down, and Anderson was actually taking advantage of that and landing some decent strikes. So there is that too. So I would say technical ability, it's still lacking in terms of being a pure boxer, but he still has more boxing match experience than Nate Diaz. I mean, Nate Diaz has a lot of MMA fights, but then again, he's never been in a legit, professional scored boxing match. So, that's going to be interesting to see how Jake deals with the pitter patter, kind of like how Diaz keeps peppering those punches and reaching over. How is Jake going to deal with that from a technical aspect, using his footwork and his bobbing and weaving and such, and his blocking? I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see. All right, so my prediction for the fight. Honestly, I think it's going to be a close one. It's going to be interesting to see how Nate Diaz debuts in boxing. He's always had a striking heavy style in MMA, but you got to understand that's been mixed with grappling, takedowns, or pulling guard, kicks, knees, clinching, a lot of stuff that's not going to translate well to boxing. So I know he has trained with Andre Ward in the past, and Andre Ward has good things to say about Nate Diaz, but it's going to be Diaz's first time in the boxing ring, and he's going to have to adjust to that. And also, Nate usually fights at 170 welterweight, so he's going to be going up in weight to 185 here, and I think he's going to have the size disadvantage against Jake, who just looks like the bigger guy, and he also has the KO power advantage, right? So, there is that, but ultimately I could see this fight going into the later rounds, which is very exciting in my opinion. to see how Jake could fight in, rounds 7, 8, 9, 10. Like, especially if Nate is pouring on that offense and getting Jake to throw more and back and forth type of action. I want to see like how Jake could deal with being tired and Nate still having, full energy and being able to pour it on. That'll be really interesting. So I could see it going 10 rounds. I'm kind of torn. I could see either guy taking it, but ultimately I think Jake is going to win this. I can't say I'm certain, but I feel like Jake's going to win by either TKO or decision. Probably decision more so than TKO, but with all of like Diaz's like scar tissue and things like that, and the amount of hits that he takes and the way he just keeps going forward and he keeps taking those hits, I could see him being cut up or just taking so many hits to the point where he wants Jake to keep bringing it on, and the ref is like, okay, like this is enough. Like, this isn't like the UFC or MMA or something where like you're going to keep getting knocked down and get back up or whatever, I'm just going to call it here. I would say like in boxing, they seem more cautious than the UFC. But in boxing, like you can get knocked down and you could stand up. And as long as you could like stand straight and then like step to the right and left and look at the ref's eyes, like I guess you could keep going. So I don't know. But ultimately, I think Jake Paul's going to take it probably by decision, if not by TKO. But it would be cool if Diaz does win as well. It's going to be an exciting fight, and I am looking forward to it. And that's it. This Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We shall see who takes the fight. Enjoy. Peace.